Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the screen in front of him. The message from the Galactic Council made his blood boil. Another human colony was being removed from their homes. The aliens called it relocation, but Jake knew better. It was just another way to say that humans did not matter to them. For 30 years, humanity had tried to be peaceful. They followed the rules. They worked hard to prove they were worth respect. But the Council never saw them as equals. Earth was labeled as a Class 12 death world, which meant the aliens thought humans were nothing more than violent primitives who got lucky and found space travel. Lisa Harper walked up beside Jake. She was the chief military strategist for all human forces. Her face was tight with anger as she read the same message. The Council had decided that the colony on Proxima Station was breaking some new territorial rule. The humans there had 48 hours to leave or face the consequences. Jake knew what those consequences meant. The Council would send their enforcers with plasma weapons. They would show no mercy because they believed humans could not feel pain like other civilized species. After all, humans came from a dangerous world where everything tried to kill them. The aliens thought this made humans tough but also worthless. Lisa turned to Jake and said they needed to contact Admiral Helen Grant immediately. Jake agreed. The time for being patient was over. Within hours, every human leader from across the colonies joined a quantum communication link. Military officers, politicians, and corporate fleet commanders all appeared on screens. Admiral Grant appeared on the main display. Her silver hair was pulled back tight. Her face looked like it was carved from stone. She began speaking in a voice that carried across thousands of light years. She told everyone that humanity had tried diplomacy for 3 decades. They had tried cooperation. They had tried to prove their worth. But the Council only saw them as cheap labor, soldiers for their wars and subjects for their experiments. Everyone listening knew someone who had suffered because of the Council. Family members taken for study and never returned. Colonies destroyed for safety reasons. Trade ships seized for inspection and lost forever. The stories were endless and heartbreaking. Admiral Grant said she was calling for a vote. Did humanity continue to bow down? Or did they remind the galaxy what Deathworlders could really do? The vote did not take long. Everyone agreed. It was time to fight. Lisa pulled up information on their military strength. Humanity had been preparing for this moment even if they had not admitted it to themselves. Every shipyard had been working extra shifts. Every military academy had trained more officers than ever before. Every research facility had been creating weapons that used human strengths. Lisa reported they had 247 big warships ready to go. Another 400 support ships were prepared. Over 50,000 trained Marines were ready for combat. The numbers sounded good, but everyone knew the Council had much more. A Council member from the Vrex species appeared on an emergency channel. His translator turned his clicks and whistles into words everyone could understand. He told the humans they must reconsider their madness. He said humanity was just one species among thousands. The Council's power was infinite. Jake stepped forward to respond. He told the Council representative that humans were done asking permission to exist. They were done begging for respect. And they were done pretending to be weak just because the aliens wanted them to be. The Vrex counselor's eyes went wide. He said humans could not possibly believe they could stand against the whole galaxy. Jake smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. He said the Council had never fought a war against Deathworlders before. They were about to learn why that was a big mistake. The transmission ended. All across human space, ships began to move. The war had started and there was no going back now. Jake thought about what this meant for humanity. They were starting a war against an enemy that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. The Council had more ships, better technology, and the support of hundreds of species. On paper, humanity had no chance of winning. But Jake also knew something the Council did not understand. Humans came from Earth, a world that tried to kill everything living on it. They had evolved fighting predators, diseases, natural disasters, and each other. Every human alive was descended from survivors who refused to give up, no matter how bad things got. The Council species came from safe worlds. They had evolved in peace and comfort. They had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival. That was going to be their downfall. Lisa was already planning the first attacks. She knew they could not fight the Council in open battle. The aliens had too many ships and too much firepower. Instead, humanity would use the tactics that had always worked on Earth. Hit-and-run attacks. Guerrilla warfare, striking at weak points and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The Council expected civilized warfare. They expected ships to line up and shoot at each other until one side won. They expected rules and honor. Humanity was not going to give them any of those things. Jake looked at the star map showing human territory. Every colony, every station, every outpost was marked. These were homes to millions of people who just wanted to live in peace. The Council had threatened all of them for too long. He thought about the colonists on Proxima Station who had only hours left before the enforcers arrived. He thought about all the humans who had been taken or killed by the Council over the years. He thought about the children growing up believing they were inferior, because that was what the aliens told them. All of that was about to change. Humanity was going to war, and they were going to fight with everything they had. The Council had pushed them too far. They had ignored every attempt at peace. They had dismissed every request for fair treatment. Now they would face the consequences of their arrogance. Jake gave the order to his crew. Prepare for combat operations. Check all weapon systems. Plot courses to their first targets. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this moment even though they had hoped it would never come. As the Valiant prepared to jump to hyperspace, Jake thought about what his old instructor at the academy used to say. Humans were persistence hunters. They did not give up. They kept coming no matter how many times they were knocked down. That was how humanity had survived on Earth, and that was how they would survive among the stars. The Council was about to learn a hard lesson. Never underestimate a species from a death world. Never push survivors into a corner, and never start a fight with someone who has nothing left to lose. Ryan cross-checked his instruments one more time. His ship, the Defiant, was leading the first attack against the Council. The target was a listening post in the Keller sector. The Council believed it was impossible to attack. They had shields that could survive a supernova, and weapons that could track 1,000 targets at once. But the Council had made a mistake. They had built their defenses to fight against civilized species who followed predictable rules. Humans did not follow those rules. Ryan ordered his crew to deploy the shadow drones. Karen Wells, his tactical officer, pressed the buttons with steady hands. The drones launched from the ship silently. They were a human invention that used a simple trick. Instead of fancy stealth technology, they just did not give off much energy at all. The Council's sensors were designed to detect big energy signatures from normal ships. The shadow drones used chemical thrusters and coasted on momentum. To the station's expensive sensors, they looked like space dust floating by. Nothing worth noticing. The drones reached the station and attached themselves to the shield generators like parasites. Then they waited in silence. Ryan transmitted orders to his fleet. 24 human ships hung in the darkness with their engines barely running. They looked dead, but they were ready. Council patrol ships passed right by them without seeing anything. The alien crews felt safe behind their shields and weapons. They had no idea that death was already clinging to their station. Ryan said one word quietly. Execute. The shadow drones all exploded at the same time. They were not very powerful bombs, but they did not need to be. Each one was placed exactly on a cooling vent, the one weak spot on the shield generators. The generators overloaded and failed in a chain reaction. Before the station crew could even understand what was happening, human railguns opened fire. Solid metal slugs accelerated to incredible speeds punched through the station's hull like bullets through paper. Without shields to stop them, and without point defense systems fast enough to track them, the station had no protection. The battle was over in 90 seconds. Karen reported that the target was destroyed. The Council's perfect fortress was now just expanding debris in space. But Ryan knew this was only the beginning. The real test would come when the Council realized they were in a real fight. Similar attacks were happening all over the galaxy. Danny Price hit a supply depot in the Rathon system. He used magnetic harpoons to board Council cargo ships before they could send distress signals. Nicole Shaw led an ambush in an asteroid field, hiding her ships among the rocks until a Council patrol passed by. Then she struck from behind with torpedoes. The tactics were old by human standards. They came from Earth's history of naval warfare, guerrilla fighting, and special operations. But to the Council, they were completely alien. Civilized species announced their attacks. They fought from predictable positions. They gave mercy to defeated enemies. Humans did none of these things. Admiral Helen Grant watched the tactical display from her command ship. Green icons representing successful human attacks appeared all over the holographic star map. Not a single human ship had been lost yet. The first strikes were going even better than planned. Gary Stone, her intelligence officer, reported that the Council was scrambling to respond. They were pulling ships from border patrols and peacekeeping missions. Intelligence estimated they would have a major force ready within 72 hours. Helen nodded. That was what they had expected. She ordered all human forces to fall back to defensive positions. They had hurt the Council badly. Now it was time to see how the aliens responded to a real fight. The message went out across all human channels. Ships began withdrawing, leaving behind burning Council installations and a galaxy that was suddenly paying very close attention. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Galactic Council faced an enemy that did not fear them, and for the first time ever they faced an enemy from a death world. The Council's military commander, Zrel, assembled a response fleet at a massive shipyard. He had fought in 40 campaigns and never lost. But as he read the intelligence reports about the human attacks, he felt something he had not experienced in a very long time. Doubt Zrel told his staff that these humans fought without honor. They struck from darkness. They refused direct combat. They targeted supply lines instead of military vessels. His tactical advisor, a young officer named Kith, looked at the holographic display with confusion. Kith said the human ships appeared to be worse than Council ships in every way. Their weapons were simple kinetic systems. Their shields were weak. Their technology was generations behind. So why were they winning? Zrel did not have a good answer. The humans should have been easy to crush, but somehow they were achieving incredible results with inferior equipment. He decided they would use overwhelming numbers. He assembled 8 battle groups with hundreds of ships. They would sweep through human space and remind these primitives why they should have stayed on their planet. But before his fleet could leave, a message was broadcast on all Council channels. It was Jake Morrison, standing alone on the bridge of the Valiant. He spoke directly to the Council and every species under their rule. Jake said that humanity had endured their arrogance and suffered their cruelty for the last time. Humans were not asking for equality anymore. They were taking it. Any Council vessel that entered human space would be destroyed. Any Council station that threatened human colonies would be eliminated. And any species that sided with the Council would learn what it meant to fight a war against a death world. The transmission ended. Zrel felt fear creeping into his mind. He had faced many enemies in his long career, but none of them had ever spoken with such absolute certainty. The humans were not bluffing. They were not trying to negotiate. They were simply stating facts. He looked at the 8 battle groups preparing to launch. Hundreds of ships crewed by thousands of trained personnel, advanced weapons and shields, centuries of military tradition and tactical knowledge. It should have been more than enough to crush a single species. But as Zrel watched his fleet prepare for departure, he could not shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. These humans had come from a world that tried to kill them every day. They had survived and thrived in conditions that would destroy most civilized species within hours. What did that mean for a war? What did that mean when fighting became about survival instead of honor? Zrel did not know, but he was about to find out. The human forces gathered at their defensive positions. Every captain knew that the Council's response would be massive. They had hurt the aliens' pride, and pride demanded retaliation. Jake stood on his bridge and thought about the coming battle. They had surprised the Council with the first attacks. That advantage was gone now. The next fight would be brutal, bloody, and terrible. Many humans would die, but they would make the Council pay dearly for every human life. That was the promise Jake made to himself and his crew. If the Council wanted a war, they would get one. And they would learn that humans knew how to fight wars better than any civilized species could imagine. Commander Zrel's massive fleet entered the Epsilon sector with complete confidence. 8 battle groups with over 300 capital ships and twice that many support vessels represented the largest military force the Council had gathered in 200 years. Surely the humans would surrender when they saw such overwhelming power. They got their answer at the Horus Junction. Jake Morrison waited aboard the Valiant with just 47 human ships. To anyone watching, the situation looked hopeless. The Council had 10 times more ships. But Jake was not thinking about numbers. He was thinking about strategy. Lisa Harper, now serving as his executive officer, stood beside him. She said the council was assuming humans would fight them head-on. That was what any civilized species would do in this situation. Jake smiled grimly and said they should be uncivilized then. The human fleet suddenly broke formation and scattered in what looked like a panicked retreat. The council ships surged forward eagerly, wanting to catch the fleeing vessels before they could escape. It was exactly what Jake had planned. He gave the order and the asteroid field behind the human position came alive. What the council had dismissed as natural space rocks were actually camouflaged missile platforms. Humanity had placed them there weeks ago, preparing for this exact moment. Thousands of missiles erupted from their hiding spots, their engines blazing as they accelerated toward the council fleet. The council's defensive systems activated immediately. Precise laser fire began destroying the incoming missiles. They stopped 90% of them before impact. But 90% was not enough. The missiles that got through did not explode. Instead, they released payloads of reflective chaff, electromagnetic pulse generators, and heat flares. Within seconds, the council's sensor systems were overwhelmed. False targets appeared everywhere. Signal interference blocked their communications. The fleet's careful formation began breaking apart in confusion. Karen Wells reported from Tactical that the enemy fleet was blind. Their coordination was falling apart. Jake did not hesitate. He ordered all ships to reverse course and engage at will. Target their command vessels first. The human ships turned around and charged back into the fight. Their railguns fired in rapid succession. Without sensors to coordinate their defense, the council ships were vulnerable. Human slugs tore through hulls, destroyed engines, and punched through command decks. But the council was not helpless. Commander Zrel recovered from his shock and rallied his forces. He ordered all ships to switch to manual targeting. Focus all fire on the human vessels. Show these primitives the price of resistance. The council's plasma cannons began finding their targets. The human destroyer Tempest took a direct hit that buckled her hull. The cruiser Phoenix lost her engines and began drifting helplessly, her emergency beacons screaming for help. Jake watched as friendly ships began disappearing from his tactical display. The cost was high, but it was a cost humanity had known they would have to pay. He ordered all damaged vessels to withdraw immediately. The remaining ships would provide covering fire. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it finally ended, both sides had suffered terrible losses. The council had lost over 80 ships, including 2 massive dreadnoughts. The humans had lost 19 vessels and thousands of crew members, but the humans had held their ground. The council's armada had been stopped cold. Their advance into human territory had failed. Commander Zrel retreated to regroup. His confidence was shaken badly. These humans fought with a ferocity he had never encountered before. They accepted casualties that would break any civilized species. They used tactics that seemed almost suicidal. And worst of all, they were learning and adapting with every battle. Back on Earth, Admiral Helen Grant addressed the unified human government. Planetary leaders appeared on her view screen with grave expressions. They wanted to know if humanity could win this war. President Laura Bennett asked the question directly. Could they hold against the council? Helen paused before answering honestly. If they fought ship to ship in traditional battles, no. The council had superior numbers and technology. But if they fought using human tactics and took advantage of their Deathworld origins, then yes, they could win. Carl Hughes, the Minister of Defense, asked her to define the human way of fighting. Helen gestured to the star map behind her. She said they would not fight where the council was strong. They would fight where the council was weak. They would target supply lines, communications, and morale. They would make the aliens afraid to leave their fortified positions. They would turn this into a war of attrition and prove that humans could endure suffering that would destroy any other species. The words hung heavy in the air. It was a brutal strategy that would cost countless lives on both sides. But humanity had tried peace. Peace had brought them nothing except subjugation and cruelty. President Bennett made her decision. Do whatever is necessary to end this war, protect our people and secure our freedom. Orders went out across human space. Ships dispersed into small, independent units that could strike anywhere. Marine battalions trained for boarding actions against alien vessels. Engineers designed new weapons that emphasized reliability over complexity. Civilian volunteers signed up for militia training by the millions. Humanity was mobilizing for total war. The galaxy was about to learn what that concept truly meant. In the council chambers on their capital world, the assembled delegates argued with increasing desperation. The Vrex representative demanded immediate and overwhelming military action. The Kelleran ambassador suggested trying negotiation. The Thrandian council member proposed economic sanctions. High Counselor Marith, a being of pure energy contained in a crystal matrix, silenced them all with a gesture. The humans had made their position clear. They would not submit under any circumstances. The question was simple. Did the council accept human independence, or did they commit to total extermination? The chamber fell into silence. For thousands of years, the council had maintained peace through overwhelming force. They had never faced an enemy quite like humanity before. Marith continued speaking. The humans came from a death world. They evolved in constant competition with predators, diseases, and environmental hazards that would kill most council species within hours. Their entire psychology was shaped by surviving against impossible odds. Perhaps the council should have recognized what that would mean when humans reached for the stars. The Vrex representative demanded to know if Marith was suggesting they surrender to primitives. Marith replied coldly that they should consider whether this was a war they could actually win. And if they could win, what price they were willing to pay for victory. The debate continued for days, but the outcome was already decided by pride and arrogance. The council would not back down. They would crush the human rebellion no matter how many ships it cost or how long it took. They just did not realize yet that the cost would be far higher than they could imagine. The humans had been pushed past their breaking point. Now the council would face the full fury of a species that knew how to survive, how to adapt, and how to win against overwhelming odds. The war was about to enter its most brutal phase. Both sides were committed now. There could be no peace without victory, and victory would require sacrifice beyond anything the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. 3 months into the war, the galaxy had never seen anything like it. Human strike teams appeared randomly across council space, hitting installations that were supposed to be safe behind their lines. Supply convoys vanished without any trace. Communication relays went dark and stopped working. Even civilian shipping routes became dangerous as the conflict spread into every corner of the galaxy. Ryan Cross commanded a strike team aboard the stealth ship Nightfall. His crew had been chosen because they could operate alone for long periods without direct orders from command. They could make their own decisions and adapt to changing situations. The council called them ghosts because they could never predict where humans would strike next. Greg Martin, his sensor officer, reported a new target. A council munitions depot in the Velen system. Light defenses and minimal patrol presence. The depot supplied plasma charges for 3 nearby council battle groups. Destroying it would force those groups to withdraw for resupply, creating a gap in their defensive lines. Ryan studied the information carefully. The depot looked like an easy target, but after months of fighting, he knew to be suspicious of anything that looked too easy. He ordered a full sensor sweep for hidden defenses. As the Nightfall drifted closer on minimal power, Greg's instruments picked up something unexpected. Life signs at the depot. Many life signs. And they were human. The council was using captured colonists as forced labor. Ryan felt sick to his stomach. The council had been capturing humans from isolated colonies and forcing them to work. This complicated everything. Destroying the depot meant killing innocent humans. But leaving it meant those battle groups could keep fighting. Karen Wells ran calculations from the navigation station. She reported negative on a rescue attempt. They would have to go loud to extract the prisoners, and there were 4 patrol ships within 15 minutes of responding. The Nightfall would never escape in time. Ryan faced an impossible choice. Complete the mission and kill innocent people, or abort and leave those prisoners in council hands. There was no good option available. Then Susan Hayes, his communications officer, spoke up with an idea. What if they forced the council to evacuate the facility? A radiation leak, maybe? If they damaged the reactor just enough to trigger safety protocols without causing an actual meltdown, the council would evacuate everyone, including the human prisoners. Ryan saw the brilliance immediately. He ordered a new targeting solution. They needed to breach the reactor containment without destroying it. Greg prepared to broadcast a radiation emergency on all council frequencies. The moment evacuation started, they would grab their people and then destroy the depot. The plan worked perfectly. The Nightfall's railgun punched through the depot's hull and cracked the reactor's secondary containment. Alarms screamed through the station. Council personnel panicked and scrambled for evacuation shuttles. dragging the human prisoners with them in their rush to escape. As soon as the shuttles launched, human Marines from the Nightfall stormed aboard using magnetic grapples. Close combat erupted in the narrow corridors of the Council vessels. The Marines used weapons designed for human hands and human reflexes. They overwhelmed their alien opponents with speed and controlled aggression. 12 minutes later, all shuttles were secured. The freed prisoners stared at their rescuers with disbelief and hope in their eyes. One young woman named Claire Patterson grabbed Ryan's arm. She said the Council told them humanity had surrendered. They said the Council had won the war. Ryan shook his head. They were just getting started. He ordered the prisoners taken to medical bay and the charges prepared. The depot was about to have a very bad day. As the Nightfall pulled away, the depot exploded in a massive fireball. 3 Council battle groups would now have to withdraw for resupply, and humanity had sent a clear message. No human would be left behind in Council hands, but not every mission ended successfully. Danny Price led his squadron into the Korath sector, targeting a Council communications hub. Intelligence suggested light defenses and an easy target. But intelligence was wrong. The moment his ships dropped out of hyperspace, overwhelming firepower met them. The Council had anticipated the attack and set a trap. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes filled the space around Danny's squadron like deadly rain. Danny shouted for evasive maneuvers, but it was too late. The destroyer Warrior took a direct hit and her reactor went critical. The cruiser Guardian lost her entire bow section to a plasma burst. Ships were dying all around him. His ship, the Ranger, twisted and burned trying to escape the kill zone. Kevin Brooks, his tactical officer, worked frantically at his station. He reported they were boxed in with enemy ships on all vectors. There was no way out. But Danny had not survived 3 months of war by giving up easily. He ordered all power to forward shields and set course for ramming speed. The crew stared at him in shock, but they trusted their captain. They did not hesitate to follow orders. The Ranger accelerated directly toward the largest Council vessel, a dreadnought that could destroy them with a single shot. The Council captain assumed the humans were making a desperate escape attempt. He adjusted his ship's position to block their path. It was exactly what Danny wanted. At the last possible moment, the Ranger fired her main railgun at point-blank range. The solid slug punched completely through the dreadnought's bridge section, killing everyone inside instantly. Then the Ranger used her maneuvering thrusters to spiral away, slipping through the gap in the enemy formation before they could react. The navigation officer locked jump coordinates. 3, 2, 1, jump. The Ranger disappeared into hyperspace, leaving chaos and confusion behind. The Council squadron had lost its command ship and suffered heavy damage. But Danny had lost half his squadron and hundreds of crew members. When he returned to base, Admiral Helen Grant was waiting. She did not reprimand him for the losses. War meant losses. Instead, she promoted him and gave him a new assignment: train other captains in close-quarters combat tactics. Helen told him they were learning with every battle. Every skirmish taught them something new about fighting these wars. The Council had forgotten how to adapt, because they had not faced a real challenge in thousands of years. That was humanity's greatest advantage. Danny looked out at the stars through the viewport. He asked how many more people they would lose before the war ended. Helen's expression was somber. As many as it takes. The Council gave humanity a choice between submission and death. They chose to fight. Now they had to see it through to the end, whatever that end might be. Across the galaxy, the fighting intensified week by week. Human casualties mounted into the tens of thousands. Ships were destroyed. Colonies were attacked. Families mourned their dead. But Council casualties climbed even higher. For every human ship destroyed, 2 or 3 Council vessels were eliminated. For every human colony attacked, a Council installation was destroyed in retaliation. The war had become exactly what Admiral Grant predicted. A grinding war of attrition where both sides bled and suffered. But in wars of attrition, the advantage went to the side that could endure the most suffering and still keep fighting. The Deathworlders were very good at enduring suffering. They had learned that lesson over millions of years of evolution on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. Now they were teaching that lesson to the galaxy. The Council was learning that technological superiority and numerical advantage meant nothing against an enemy that refused to quit. They were learning that honor and tradition were weaknesses when fighting a species that valued survival above all else. Most importantly, they were learning that starting a war with humans was the biggest mistake they had ever made. 6 months into the war, the Galactic Council faced a crisis they had never anticipated in their thousands of years of rule. Their economy was falling apart piece by piece. Trade routes that had operated safely for generations were now too dangerous to use. Member species were withdrawing from Council protection and trying to negotiate their own peace treaties with humanity. Most damaging of all, the Council's military was stretched beyond its breaking point. High Counselor Marith convened an emergency session. The assembled delegates looked exhausted and defeated. Their confidence had been shattered by months of continuous losses and setbacks. The military advisor presented the damage report. Humans had captured or destroyed over 400 Council vessels. They had raided 18 major installations across the galaxy. They had liberated 37 labor camps and freed thousands of prisoners. Council intelligence services could not predict where humans would strike next. Their fleets could not bring the humans to decisive battle where numbers would matter. The Zithran representative demanded to know how this was possible. They were fighting a single species from a primitive world. How could the mighty Council be losing to these creatures? Marith's crystalline form pulsed with frustrated energy. The humans were a species forged by constant adversity. While the Council grew soft and comfortable in their supremacy, humans were fighting for survival against their own planet every single day. The Council should have listened when humans tried to explain what they were capable of. Commander Z'Rell appeared via hologram to address the Council. His reputation was in ruins after multiple defeats. He told them honestly that humans did not fight as civilized species did. They did not value honor or tradition over victory. They used weapons the Council considered barbaric. They employed tactics the Council considered dishonorable. And, most frustrating of all, their strategies were devastatingly effective. The admission hung heavy in the air. The Galactic Council had been outfought, outthought, and outmaneuvered by the very species they had dismissed as primitive savages. But humanity was also suffering terribly. Admiral Helen Grant reviewed casualty reports with growing dread every single day. 40,000 military personnel were dead. 15,000 civilians had been killed in Council retaliatory strikes. 30 ships had been destroyed completely. The numbers were staggering and heartbreaking. President Laura Bennett contacted Helen via secure channel. Her face looked drawn and aged. The population was demanding to know when this nightmare would end. They had been at war for 6 months. How much longer could they sustain such losses? Helen had asked herself the same question every night when she tried to sleep. She told the president honestly that the Council was breaking under the pressure. Intelligence suggested they were having serious supply problems, morale issues, and political fractures within their alliance. But they were not broken yet. Humanity needed one more major push to force them to the negotiating table. President Bennett asked what kind of push Helen had in mind. Helen brought up a tactical display showing the entire galaxy. She proposed striking at Celestera Prime, the Council's capital world. Humanity did not have the forces to conquer it, but they could prove that nowhere in the galaxy was safe from human retaliation. That should be enough to end the war. The plan was audacious to the point of seeming insane. Celestera Prime was the most heavily defended world in the entire galaxy. Shields, weapon platforms, and an entire defensive fleet protected it. No enemy had threatened the capital in 5,000 years. But humanity had learned that conventional wisdom did not apply when fighting Deathworlders. Jake Morrison volunteered immediately to lead the strike force. His ship, the Valiant, had survived every major engagement of the war. His crew had become legendary among human forces. If anyone could accomplish the impossible mission, it was them. The strike force assembled in complete secrecy at a staging area in uncharted space. 50 ships carefully selected for their speed and firepower gathered together. Among them were veterans like Ryan Cross in the Nightfall and Danny Price in his new command vessel, the Avenger. Jake addressed all the assembled captains via video link. He told them honestly that this would be a one-way trip for some of them. The Council would throw everything they had at the strike force, but if they could hit Celestera Prime hard enough, they could end the war and save millions of lives on both sides. Lisa Harper pulled up the detailed tactical plan. They would use the same hit-and-run tactics that had worked throughout the campaign. Strike fast, strike hard, and disappear before the Council could mount an effective response. Their primary target was the Council's main communications array. Destroying that would cut off their ability to coordinate military forces across the galaxy. The plan was approved by everyone present. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading directly for the heart of Council power and authority. They arrived at Celestera Prime during the planet's night cycle. They dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge to avoid immediate detection. The planet hung before them like a beautiful jewel, surrounded by orbital stations and defensive platforms that glittered with weapon emplacements. Jake gave the order. All ships weapons free. Execute the plan now. The human fleet split into 3 separate groups. The first group, led by Ryan Cross, targeted the outer defense stations with long-range railgun fire. The second group, commanded by Danny Price, launched a massive wave of missiles designed to overwhelm the point defense systems. The third group, under Jake's direct command, would penetrate the inner defenses to strike at the communications array itself. Alarms screamed across Celestera Prime. The Council's home fleet scrambled desperately to respond, but the humans had timed their attack with perfect precision. Most of the defensive fleet was scattered across the system on routine patrols. They were too far away to intervene immediately. Jake's group reached the communications array, a massive structure that orbited the planet like an artificial moon. He ordered all ships to concentrate fire on the central hub. Do not stop firing until it is nothing but debris. Railguns roared in the vacuum of space. Missiles streaked toward their target in waves. The array's defensive shields held strong for nearly a full minute, before collapsing under the relentless bombardment. Then the structure itself began breaking apart as kinetic impacts shattered its delicate systems into fragments. Karen Wells reported excitedly that the target was destroyed. The Council was now deaf and blind, unable to coordinate their forces, but victory came at a terrible cost. The Council's home fleet had finally arrived. Hundreds of ships converged on the human strike force from all directions. Jake watched his tactical display as friendly icons began disappearing one by one. He ordered all ships to withdraw to jump coordinates immediately. They had accomplished what they came to do. It was time to leave before they were all destroyed. The human fleet began its desperate escape. But not all of them would make it home. Ryan Cross's Nightfall took critical damage while protecting other ships during the withdrawal. Her engines failed completely. Danny Price's Avenger was caught in a crossfire of plasma beams. Her hull was breached in 3 separate places. Jake faced the most terrible choice of his entire life. He could stay and try to rescue the damaged ships, risking the entire fleet. Or he could withdraw and leave those ships and crews behind to certain death. He made his decision. Get everyone out who can jump to hyperspace, he ordered. The rest of us will buy you the time you need. Lisa stared at him in shock and disbelief. Jake, you cannot do this. That is a direct order, Commander. Take command of the fleet and get them home safely. Tell Admiral Grant the mission succeeded. Before Lisa could argue further, Jake activated the emergency command transfer protocol. The Valiant's bridge crew worked in grim silence as they positioned themselves between the Council fleet and the escaping human ships. Jake addressed his crew one final time. It has been the greatest honor of my life serving with all of you. Now let us show the Council what humans are truly made of. The Valiant and the other damaged ships turned to face overwhelming odds together. They would not survive this battle, but they would buy precious minutes for their comrades to escape to safety. Jake thought about Earth and the blue skies he had left behind to fight among distant stars. He thought about all the colonists they had saved during the war. He thought about children who would grow up free because of what humanity had accomplished here. And he thought about all the species in the galaxy who would learn from this war that arrogance and cruelty always had consequences. Fire everything we have, he ordered calmly. The Valiant's last battle was brief but absolutely glorious. She destroyed 12 Council ships before her reactor finally overloaded in a brilliant explosion. The surviving human fleet returned home to a victory that tasted like ashes in their mouths. They had dealt the Council a devastating blow that would echo across the galaxy for generations. But the cost had been terrible and heartbreaking. Jake Morrison, Ryan Cross, Danny Price, and thousands of other brave souls would never see Earth's blue skies again. Their sacrifice hung heavy on everyone who had made it home alive. But their deaths achieved what 6 months of brutal warfare could not accomplish alone. Within 1 week, the Galactic Council requested a ceasefire. The request came through official diplomatic channels with none of their usual arrogance or condescension. Within 2 weeks, formal peace negotiations began on neutral ground. And within 1 month, Humanity was granted full independence and equal status within the galactic community. The war was over. Humanity had won their freedom through blood and sacrifice. Admiral Helen Grant stood before the assembled Galactic Council as an equal for the first time in human history. She was no longer a supplicant begging for scraps of recognition. She represented a sovereign power that had earned respect through strength and determination. Helen spoke clearly so every species in the galaxy would hear and understand. The war is over, but humanity will never forget what led to it. We did not seek this conflict. We tried peace first. We tried diplomacy and cooperation. You forced us to war through your arrogance and cruelty. The cost was paid in blood by both our peoples. High Counselor Marith's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been shame or regret. We underestimated your kind completely. We saw you as primitives from a dangerous world. We failed to understand what that truly meant. We will not make that mistake again. Helen's expression remained stern and unyielding. See that you do not. Because the galaxy now knows exactly what Deathworlders are capable of when pushed beyond their limits. We fought for our freedom and our dignity. We won both through sacrifice. But we would much prefer to build and create rather than destroy. The choice of whether we remain allies or enemies going forward is entirely yours to make. The peace treaty was signed on neutral ground with delegations from across the galaxy bearing witness. Humanity gained full sovereignty over all their colonies and settlements. They received trade rights equal to any council species. Most importantly, they gained a permanent seat at the table when galactic decisions were made. Never again would humanity's fate be decided by others. The price had been almost unbearable. 80,000 military and civilian casualties. Hundreds of ships destroyed in battle. Dozens of colonies damaged or destroyed by council retaliation. The numbers represented real people with real families who mourned them, but humanity had proven beyond any doubt that they belonged among the stars, not as servants or curiosities, but as equals who could stand alongside any species. On Earth, President Laura Bennett dedicated a massive memorial to all those who had fallen during the war. The names of Jake Morrison, Ryan Cross, Danny Price, and tens of thousands of others were inscribed carefully in black stone. Above the names, a simple inscription captured everything. They came from a death world, and they taught the galaxy what that truly meant. The war changed everything across the known galaxy. Species that had cowered in fear before the Council for generations found courage to demand better treatment. Major reforms were implemented in how the Council operated. The arbitrary classification system that ranked worlds and species by supposed value was completely abolished. And humanity, once dismissed as primitive survivors, became one of the most respected species in galactic society almost overnight. But the humans never forgot the terrible cost of earning that respect. Every ship in the Earth Defense Force bore the names of fallen heroes etched into their hulls. Every officer in training studied the tactics and sacrifices of those early desperate battles. And every generation of human children learned the critical lesson that their ancestors had paid for with their blood and lives. Freedom is never simply given by those in power. It must be earned through struggle. It must be defended with determination. And sometimes it must be paid for with the ultimate sacrifice that brave people make. The Deathworlders had been pushed far beyond their breaking point. They had reminded the galaxy of an ancient truth that civilized species had forgotten over peaceful millennia. The most dangerous enemy is not necessarily the strongest or the most technologically advanced. The most dangerous enemy is the one with nothing left to lose and everything worth fighting for. Humanity, forged over millions of years in the crucible of Earth's deadly environments, had proven they possessed both the will and the capability to stand against any force in the universe. They had shown that determination and adaptability could overcome superior technology, that courage could defeat overwhelming numbers, that the human spirit, when pushed to its limits, was unbreakable. The war had ended with a peace treaty, but something far more important had been won. Respect, recognition, the absolute certainty that humanity would never again bow to those who believed themselves superior. Lisa Harper, who had survived the final battle and taken command when Jake made his sacrifice, stood at the memorial on Earth. She placed her hand on the cold stone where his name was carved. Around her, thousands of other survivors did the same for their lost friends and family members. The memorial stood on a hill overlooking the ocean. The wind carried the salt smell from the waves below. Birds flew overhead in the blue sky that so many humans had left behind to fight among distant stars. It was peaceful and beautiful, everything they had fought to protect. A young girl approached Lisa shyly. She could not have been more than 7 years old. She asked if Lisa had known the heroes whose names were on the wall. Lisa knelt down to the child's level and said yes, she had known many of them. They were her friends and comrades. The girl asked why they had to die. It was an impossible question to answer simply. Lisa thought carefully before responding. She said they died so that little girls like her could grow up free. They died so humanity could stand proud among the stars. They died so future generations would never have to bow down to anyone. The girl seemed to understand in the way children sometimes do. She placed a small flower at the base of the memorial and walked away holding her mother's hand. Lisa stood and looked out at the ocean again. The war was over. The fighting had stopped. But the work of building a better future was just beginning. Humanity had proven they could survive a war. Now they had to prove they could thrive in peace. Relations with the Council slowly improved over the following years. Trade agreements were negotiated fairly. Cultural exchanges began. Some Council species even apologized formally for their past treatment of humans. The galaxy was learning to see humanity not as dangerous primitives but as valuable partners. But humanity never let their guard down completely. The war had taught them hard lessons about trusting others to protect their interests. The Earth Defense Force remained strong and well-trained. Human colonies maintained their own defense capabilities, and every human child learned their history, including the war that had won their freedom. The legend of the Deathworlders spread throughout the galaxy. Other species from harsh worlds found inspiration in humanity's example. They too began demanding fair treatment and equal rights. The Council's age of absolute authority was ending, replaced by a more balanced system where all species had voices. Humanity had not set out to change the galaxy. They had simply refused to accept injustice any longer. But in fighting for their own freedom, they had started something far larger. A movement toward true equality and mutual respect among the stars. Admiral Helen Grant retired 5 years after the war ended. She had served humanity faithfully through its darkest hour. Now she wanted to spend her remaining years in peace. At her retirement ceremony, she was asked what she was most proud of. She thought for a long moment before answering. Not the battles we won or the enemy ships we destroyed. I am most proud that we never lost our humanity during the war. We fought hard, but we never became the monsters they believed we were. We remained who we are, survivors, builders, protectors of those who cannot protect themselves. Those words became a guiding principle for humanity going forward. They would be strong enough to defend themselves. But they would never become the oppressors they had fought against. The death world that had forged them had taught them to survive. But it had also taught them compassion for all who struggled. The memorial on Earth became a place of pilgrimage for humans and aliens alike. Visitors from across the galaxy came to pay respects to those who had fallen. They came to learn about the war that had changed everything. And they came to understand that true strength came not from weapons or numbers, but from the unbreakable determination to be free. The inscription on the memorial captured a truth that would echo through history. They came from a death world and they taught the galaxy what that meant. It meant survival against all odds. It meant never giving up no matter how hopeless things seemed. It meant standing together when standing alone meant death. But most of all, it meant that humanity had earned their place among the stars through courage, sacrifice, and an absolute refusal to surrender their dignity to anyone. The war was over, the peace had begun, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson.